participation and to the various government bureaux and departments for their cooperation. I so submit.
Questions. Question 1. Ms. Lam So-wai. Thank you, President. A survey has found that amid the COVID-19 epidemic, about 10% of the respondents developed post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, including intrusive memories and avoidance behaviors. Regarding mental health services amid the epidemic, will the government inform this council? First, whether it will consider launching a territory-wide mental health survey to gain an understanding about the mental health condition of members of the public amid the epidemic with a view to formulating targeted support measures. If so, of the details and timetable, if not the reasons for that. Second, as it is learned that amid the epidemic, online or telephone counseling programs and emotional support services have become popular, whether the government will consider strengthening such services in a systematic manner so as to adapt to the new norm in the era of pandemic. If so, of the details and timetable, if not the reasons for that. And third, whether it is considered by following the practice of setting up district health centers, setting up community mental health centers in the 18 districts across the territory, so as to provide one-stop mental health support services, as well as services such as bereavement counseling, which cater for the needs in the era of epidemic. Thank you. Secretary for Health. President, the government attaches great importance to the mental health of the public under the epidemic and understands that the COVID-19 epidemic has posed considerable challenges on both the physical and mental well-being of the public. Regarding Ms. Lam So-wai's question, in consultation with Labor and Welfare Bureau, Social Welfare Department, Department of Health and Hospital Authority, I hereby reply as follows. First of all, the government established the Advisory Committee on Mental Health on December 2017 to advise the government on mental health policy. In order to better understand the state of the mental health of the public, on the Advisory Committee's advice, the former Food and Health Bureau, currently retitled the Health Bureau, commissioned the University of Hong Kong and the Chinese University of Hong Kong in 2019 to conduct 3 mental health prevalence surveys with a duration of 42 to 51 months. The targets of the 3 surveys are children and adolescents aged 6 to 17, adolescents and young adults aged 15 to 24, and elderly persons aged 60 and above, respectively. The surveys are still in progress and are expected to be completed in the first quarter of 2023, the third quarter of 2022, and the fourth quarter of 2022, respectively. Separately, in response to the COVID-19 epidemic, the Health Bureau allocated funding through the Health and Medical Research Fund promptly and commissioned the local universities to undertake medical research on COVID-19. Since April 2020, HMRF has approved a total of $556 million for 70 related medical research projects. Among those 70 research projects and investigator-initiated projects invited by HMRF openly every year, 7 research projects are focused on COVID-19 and mental health, covering the psychological impacts on the general public and COVID-19 patients under the epidemic. These include the prevalence of psychological distress, anxiety, depression, and stress-related diseases, as well as treatment of different types, with a view to improving the quality of life and mental health of the public under the epidemic. The duration of these research projects ranges from 1 to 5 years. The results of the above-mentioned surveys will assist the government in devising targeted mental health policies and supporting measures. Second, amid the COVID-19 epidemic, HA has maintained normal inpatient services and specialist outpatient clinic services. In the light of the different needs of patients, HA's psychiatric specialist services are provided to suitable patients through other means, such as by following up on patients' conditions via phone calls. In addition, HA's psychiatric specialist services are piloting the provision of telehealth services with an application, such as arranging psychogeriatric outreach services for suitable patients living in residential care homes for the elderly and day hospital services for suitable psychiatric patients through remote video conferencing. On the other hand, the Mental Health Direct Hotline of HA continues to operate round the clock to provide support to persons in need. Under the coordination of the Advisory Committee, DH has been implementing a mental health promotion and public education initiative named Shall We Talk. In the light of the development of the epidemic, as well as the different needs of persons, such as carer, students, persons under isolation or quarantine, ethnic minorities, etc., Shall We Talk keeps producing and updating various mental health information and disseminates them through different channels, such as its one-stop mental health information website, social media, television, radio, etc. Amid the epidemic, the Social Welfare Department's various subsidized welfare services, including the Integrated Community Centers for Mental Wellness, Integrated Family Service Centers, Daycare Centers for the Elderly, Cyber Youth Support Teams, Hotline Services, have maintained services while continuing to provide support to persons with mental health needs through means such as phone calls and video conferencing. Instances of such support include individual and group counseling, psychological treatments, and talks, etc. Third, the establishment of district health centers is to enhance public awareness of preventive health care and personal health management through community networks. To date, DHCs or DHC Expresses can be found in 14 districts and will be extended to cover the remaining 4 districts, namely Wong Tai Sin, Yuen Long, Southern District, and Chuen Wan in the next few months. Upon the presence in all 18 districts within this year, DHCs and DHC Expresses will serve as important hardware for promoting the collaboration of primary healthcare services. With an emphasis on preventive work, DHCs provide disease prevention services at the primary healthcare level, focusing on primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention through district-based medico-social collaboration and public-private partnership, with a view to enhancing public awareness of personal health management and disease prevention. Among the 3 levels of prevention, primary prevention provides health educational programs and preventive promotion with wide coverage, which includes mental health. Also, DHCs provide basic health risk assessments with an aim to identify health risk factors at an early stage. If members of the public are found to have emotional problems, nurses and social workers of DHCs will provide them with health consultation and counseling services. In addition, DHCs also serve as district primary healthcare hubs to work with other community partners that provide primary healthcare services and coordinate referral services, including mental health support for members of the public who are in need. We understand that some members of the public would face the unfortunate passing of family members or friends during the epidemic. Coupled with the restrictions on some traditional mourning rituals due to social distancing measures, these changes may easily intensify their grief and anxiety. To support members of the public with deceased family members or friends under the epidemic, the government and NHA have implemented the following initiatives. HA's professional team and SWD's medical social worker stations in public hospitals will provide emotion counseling to families in need, and DH set up the COVID-19 grief support hotline from March to April this year to provide emotion support and counseling services by DH's clinical psychologists to the bereaved family members. Thank you, President. Ms. Lam So-wai. Thank you, President. Thank you, Dr. Low. The epidemic has been here for over 2 years, and surveys are still in progress on public's health. We have seen that there is a higher percentage of people with mental stress and depression. As I said, many people suffer from traumatic stress disorder symptoms. They may become very depressed. The COVID-19 has brought along mental stress to many people, and this should not be neglected. Although surveys on different mental health has been done and that money has been earmarked for further surveys, these are quite scattered and not a central survey of the whole society. I hope that you would actually do more to target this issue. We do have many elderly people living by themselves who were afraid to even go shop for groceries during the pandemic, and they actually did not have the opportunity to communicate with other people, and so some of them started to lose their speech. And many NGOs have been setting up hotlines to support those in need during the pandemic. However, we do not see adequate support from the government. The hotline is always busy, and even when someone picks up, they do not have the resources to really provide support. I hope that there would be systematic counseling support for the public. Although different departments under the SWD have been working on it, improvements should be made. We should not want to wait for another wave of epidemic. And that, as I said, Ms. Lam So-wai, this is not a debate. This is just a follow-up question. Please raise your question immediately. Thank you, President. DHCs are quite popular, and so this can really help early prevention. I suggest that other than the DHC, another psychological support center also be set up as well to provide counseling support to those in need as soon as possible. Dr. Low. As I said in my oral reply, DHCs provide counseling services for mental health, and this can really help provide referral services for those in need to other service providers. The SWD has set up 24 mental health centers across the districts, and they're operated by NGOs to provide services for those in need and also to provide support for caregivers as well. We're going to continue to monitor the situation under the DHC and to monitor the efficiency of the services. The pandemic continues to surge, and of course the government will attach huge importance to mental health. Dr. Stephen Wong. Thank you, President. Thank you, Secretary. I would like to follow up on DHC with referral services, including services for mental health. Does the referral service include clinical psychologists and ICCMW? Do DHC refer people to these two professional organizations? Secretary. When we identify people in need, there are nurses and social workers at the DHCs to provide counseling support. And patients can be referred to different organizations, including ICCMW, which is manned by NGOs. Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, President. Secretary, I have a particular question. The pandemic has been around for almost 3 years. Many elderly people living alone are afraid to go out, and so they are suffering from depression and mental stress. What are some of these concrete measures on the side of the government to identify these elderly people and to provide support for them? Secretary. Under the pandemic, SWD has set up centers for the elderly and to provide services for the elderly. these centers will actively and take the initiative to call the elderly and to see whether there is a need to provide grief counseling and then to refer them to appropriate services. SWD daycare center will also be open during the pandemic to receive such services. Mr. Duncan Chu. Thank you, President, and thank you to LAM So-wai for raising this issue. As a member of the hospital authority, we always discuss mental health in our meetings. The DHC and remote counseling are also important services. One of the initiatives is Shall We Talk, and this is actually a volunteering service for by the visually impaired to call up the elderly and those suffering from mental health. I think this is very significant because it can directly support those in need. Volunteers are hard to come by as well. I hope that other than putting everything under the bureaus, to consider recruiting the services of NGOs. The NGOs are very passionate about such work, but sometimes they do not have enough resources. I just want to raise this comment. Thank you. Secretary. The Shall We Talk was launched in July 2020. Other than that, we have worked with other volunteers to enhance the participation of the public in supporting mental health and raising their awareness in mental health. We're going to work with other NGOs and volunteers to collaborate on raising awareness in mental health education. Mr. Chan Pui-leung. Thank you, President. I also want to follow up on the initiative Shall We Talk. In January 2016, HA also promoted an initiative to support mental health, and now this has been replaced by Shall We Talk. The public actually does not have a very have a good understanding of these initiatives. Have you assessed the outcomes of these two initiatives? So what were the outcomes? If you didn't assess them, why did you not do so? Secretary. We did assess Shall We Talk. The HA will conduct a follow-up investigation and carry out task force talks to improve the continuation of the initiative. Mr. Yang Wing-kit. Thank you, President. Under the pandemic, many people are suffering from mental health, although many people are not aware of it themselves. Would you actually provide an assessment for everyone to take so that when they find out that there is such a problem, they will be able to reach out for help as soon as possible? Secretary. In the website of Shall We Talk, we do have such a system. As of May, there have been over 1.32 million views at this website. Mr. Sanny Lee. Thank you, President. 1.25 million people have been confirmed since the pandemic began, which means that out of every 6 to 7 people, 1 people have been confirmed with COVID. Would you actually set up a post-COVID center to support COVID patients who have recovered? because usually we also do physical or physiotherapy when we suffer from injury. So would you also provide such a post-help support for recovered patients as well? Secretary, thank you for your suggestion. We are going to follow up on this and hope to provide more mental health support for recovered COVID-19 patients.
Question number 2, the Honorable CHU Kwok-keung. Thank you, President. Regarding the non-local courses offered by Direct Subsidy Scheme, DSS secondary schools, will the government inform this council? 1. Of the total number of secondary school students who are local students and are currently taking such courses, and the percentage of such number in the total number of secondary school students across the territory. 2. Of the number of DSS secondary schools across the territory currently offering such courses, the total number of such courses, and among them, the number of those which do not offer the subjects of Chinese language and citizen and social development, CS. And 3, whether the authorities will consider requiring all such courses to offer the subjects of Chinese language and CSD so that local students taking those courses can receive a certain degree of Chinese and civic education, and formulating the criteria for the relevant teaching contents. If so, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. The Secretary for Education. President, the DSS introduced in 1991 aims to inject more flexibility and variety into the school system in Hong Kong and give parents more choices. As DSS schools receive recurrent subsidies from the government, their governance, operation, curriculum design, etc. are subject to the requirements as set out by the government. In parallel, DSS schools enjoy greater flexibility in areas such as deployment of resources, curriculum design, and student admission. Our consolidated reply to the question raised by the Honorable CHU Kwok-keung is as follows. Currently, there are 80 DSS schools in Hong Kong, including 59 secondary schools and 21 primary schools. They are mainly operated as local schools, offering education services targeted at local students. In all DSS schools, primary 1 to secondary 4 levels offer only local curriculum, whereas a small stream of non-local curriculum at secondary 5 and secondary 6 levels is offered in parallel with the local curriculum for students in 17 DSS secondary schools as an alternative choice other than the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education Examination Program to create multiple pathways for further studies. According to the statistics as at September in the 21-22 school year, there were 325,927 secondary students in Hong Kong. Among them, a total of 1,125 students took the non-local curriculum at secondary 5 and secondary 6 levels in DSS secondary schools, accounting for 0.35% of the total number of secondary students. In line with the current language education policy to enhance students' biliterate and trilingual competence, all these SS school students, regardless of nationality, are required to study Chinese language, which should be one of the foundation subjects that are compulsory throughout the 6 years of secondary curriculum. All DSS schools offering both local and non-local curricula should offer Chinese language as a core language subject for students taking the non-local curriculum. Some schools provide school-based Chinese language programs based on the needs of students. Nevertheless, the total number of lesson hours of the school-based programs should be comparable to that specified for the Chinese language subject in the local or non-local curriculum. In addition, the schools should ensure that contents of the Chinese language subject cover culture, moral, and values. As for the senior secondary subject citizen and social development, it is one of the core subjects in the HKDSE examination program. Generally speaking, DSS schools will arrange for students to study the DSE program starting from secondary 4 to enable them to explore and develop their interest in the curriculum, including CS. Topics about our Hong Kong, our country, and the contemporary world covered by CS have all along incorporated into the curriculum at different key stages at primary and secondary levels, such as general studies at the primary level, life and society, in junior secondary, the stand-alone module on Constitution, the Basic Law, and Chinese history. Under the current school curriculum, students of local schools, including those studying non-local curriculum in DSS schools, have been receiving education in a learning atmosphere conducive to the fostering of a sense of belonging towards the country, as well as positive values and attitudes, starting from primary education. All along, the EDB has been adopting a multi-pronged and coordinated approach to implement national education and national security education to nurture in students an affection for the country, strengthen their sense of national identity, and promote civic education. By adopting a diversified approach, all public sector schools and DSS schools have created a conducive atmosphere in schools to help students understand the history, culture, and conditions in China and the developments of the contemporary world through life-wide learning activities inside and outside classrooms. Schools will arrange learning activities inside and outside classrooms and take a wide range of measures, such as class teach periods, moral education, and ethics studies to promote civic education and national education according to students' needs and school context. We understand that many DSS schools offering non-local curriculum have made use of museums and cultural facilities and activities to facilitate the study of history and cultivate students' interest in artifact appreciation, organized diversified liaison and exchange activities such as establishing sister schools with mainland schools, and arranging exchange visits to provide opportunities for students to gain first-hand experience of the culture and the latest development of the country, actively encourage students to participate in EDB's activities, such as the territory-wide inter-school basic law competition and the National Constitution Day online quiz competition, as well as arrange relevant learning activities such as national flag raising ceremony, delivery of speech under the national flag, talks, film appreciation visits on days of significant historical events. Mainland study tours constitutes a crucial part of this year's subject. We understand that many schools have already made plans for students to participate in mainland study tours subject to the development of the epidemic situation and the resumption of quarantine-free travel with the mainland to enable students to have in-situ experience of the culture developed in the long history of our country and to deepen their understanding of the country's situation. The learning outcomes achieved through these diversified measures, which are not confined to students taking this year's subject, in promoting the understanding of national development, cultural heritage, and a sense of national identity would be much better than learning the subject in classroom. Regardless of students taking the local or non-local curriculum, schools have endeavored to promote education on all fronts through different means, and the efforts are not limited to the study of relevant subjects. The teaching contents and requirements of the two subjects have been set in detail in the relevant curriculum guides, which are Chinese language education key learning Area Curriculum Guide Primary 1 to Secondary 6, and Citizen and Social Development Curriculum and Assessment Guide Secondary 4 to 6, announced by the Curriculum Development Council for Schools Reference and Use. Thank you, President. Mr. CHU Kwok-keung. Thank you, President. Thank you, Secretary. For DSS schools which have received government subsidies, are you sure that all of them are providing civic education in accordance with the government's requirements as well as in education? And how does the government monitor that they are doing so? Secretary, for all DSS schools, they are subsidized by the government and they can charge a tuition fee to provide facilities and services above the average level. Now, on DSS schools, provision of Chinese language and civic education and national security education programs, they have to be operating in accordance with the local models. So basically, their programs are launched in accordance with our curriculum guide. As I said, apart from the small number of students taking non-local courses, all students are taking Chinese language and also civic education courses. So how do we monitor the quality? We would do it by way of inspections, visits, and liaison with schools to get a better understanding on the quality of education services provided by schools. Dr. Stephen Wong, the Secretary just said that for DSS schools, well, she has given us the number of students taking non-local courses. For such students, well, I mean, they are on the low side in terms of the percentage. So for integrating into the national development SIC, do you have plans to subsidize DSS schools to admit non-local students, especially students from the GBA, to take non-local courses here? Secretary, like I said, well, the DSS schools offer mainly local programs, and students take local exams, and their main targets are also local students. We welcome opportunities for us to help non-local students, especially those from the GBA, to take non-local courses here. We are exploring on that front, and we might organize non-local courses or mainland courses to help address the needs of children of mainland families in Hong Kong. We hope to promote the integration of Hong Kong into the GBA through such efforts. And in the GBA, we also provide schools which admit students from Hong Kong. Mr. Tang Fei. Secretary, good morning. I'm not worried about local students taking local courses in DSS schools, the civic education and Chinese language subjects. I'm not worried about the quality. So are you conducting focused inspections on such schools? For students in non-local programs in DSS schools, are they taking, say, Chinese language courses, civic education courses, and what is the effectiveness of such courses? Secretary. On the quality of teaching and learning, support for children's studies and students' performance, and so on, these are covered in our school inspections and external school review. And for S5 and S6, a small number of DSS schools are providing less than 1/3 of the students with non-local courses, and they have to meet with the relevant standards of the international courses they provide. And when they learn about national development and so on, we will be monitoring the quality of courses provided. Ms. Judy Chan, the Secretary mentioned that they're focusing on local students. There are also international schools apart from DSS schools. According to information in 2021, international schools are taking in 30 to 90% local students. Are we duty-bound to offer a learning environment conducive to learning about the national development? Well, for all schools, no matter what kind of programs they offer, they have to abide by the guidelines in relation to national security education. They should well, national security education should be an element of their education. Now, when we discuss the national anthem and national flag legislation, we encourage all schools, including international schools, to impart knowledge on that front to their students. And they must ensure that local students are taught the same. Mr. Edward Leung, for IB courses, the content is decided not by the local authorities. So that becomes a blind spot. But these programs are also registered in Hong Kong. So I think the education authorities have the duty to monitor these programs. Should the administration shoulder the main responsibility to set up the relevant standards on national development education, and such subjects should also be mandated as well. Secretary, like I said, and in Chinese language, Chinese history, and general studies and CS subjects and so on, apart from these, we adopt a multi-pro approach. We also have a standalone module on the basic law on the Constitution. So the schools can take reference from such information, and all schools should make sure that such elements are incorporated into their curriculum so that they can foster a sense of national identity in their students.
Question 3, the Honourable Peter Shiu. Thank you, President. Operators of quite a number of industries have relayed that due to the persistent shortage of labour in Hong Kong, they have been facing recruitment difficulties for a long time. Therefore, Hong Kong needs to import more non-local workers in the long run to address the needs of social and economic development. Regarding the problem of labour shortage, will the government inform this council? 1. Given that only 3,043 workers were imported to Hong Kong in 2021 under the Supplementary Labour Scheme, and it is learnt that such number was far below the relevant numbers of neighbouring regions such as Singapore, Macau, and Japan, whether the government has assessed the impacts of such a difference on the development of Hong Kong and the neighbouring regions. If not, of the reasons for that. 2. Whether it will review afresh the existing policies and measures for importation of labour and expand the importation of labour. If so, of the details. If not, the reasons for that. And 3. As the government has projected that in the coming 2 decades, the child dependency ratio of Hong Kong will decrease gradually, while the elderly dependency ratio will rise continuously. Whether the government has put in place new initiatives and measures to cope with the problem of continuous decline in the labour force and labour productivity caused by the continuously aging population in Hong Kong. If not, of the reasons for that. Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, in tandem with the social and economic development of Hong Kong, the government has all along been committed to nurturing local talents and enhancing the employability and competitiveness of employees. On the premise of safeguarding the employment priority for local workers, the government allows importation of labour so as to alleviate the shortage of manpower in individual sectors or job categories. As regards the question raised by the member, my reply is as follows. 1 and 2. The government operates different schemes for employers to apply for importation of labour on account of their actual operational circumstances so as to supplement skills not readily available in the local labour market. Depending on the skill level and/or education requirements of the job vacancies concerned, employers may apply to the Immigration Department or the Innovation and Technology Commission for admission of professionals, or to the Labour Department for importation of labour at technician level or below under the Supplementary Labour Scheme. The government from time to time takes into account relevant experience of other countries and places. Having regard to the different circumstances of demography, economy and industry structure, etc. of various places, the government reviews and formulates the policy of labor importation that suits the needs of Hong Kong. Part 3. In the face of aging population and declining birth rate, the local workforce is expected to shrink. To ensure the sustainable development of Hong Kong's economy, we need to face up to the challenges of local manpower shortage. The government will continue to promote training and retraining, providing appropriate employment services, optimized childcare services, etc., to unleash the potential local workforce. To assist people to enhance their skills for adapting to the new economy and trades, the government will increase the subsidy ceiling of the Continuing Education Fund CEF to $25,000 per person and remove the upper age limit for CEF applicants. With a view to enhancing the employability of local employees, the Employees Retraining Board also offers over 700 regular courses covering 28 industries and various generic skills. The government will continue to closely monitor the manpower supply and demand of different sectors and to put forth relevant measures for targeted sectors facing severe labor shortage, including exploring the possibility of increasing imported labor on an appropriate and regulated basis. The stakeholders will be consulted in a timely manner. Thank you. The Honourable Peter Shiu. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Many from the labour sector in this council say that government always favours the business sector but not the workers. But I don't see it that way. There are 6 oral questions. Questions 1, 2, 4, 5. The reply is over 1,000 words, but for my reply, it's just 550 characters. Maybe because you are being precise or concise with your reply, or is it because you don't have any particular views on importation of labor? Well, Secretary, when it comes to importation of labor, of course, first of all, we need to first help the local workforce first. There's no controversy about it. But then we've had the epidemic for over 2 years. If it's not because of the 5th wave of outbreak, at the end of last year, people already had difficulties recruiting staff. And then we have an aging population, and we keep talking about that. And then today, you just repeat the reply to say how you could offer childcare services to unleash, to free up mothers so they could join the workforce, but you don't make mention of importation of labor. Okay, if you want to free up the female workforce, how many of the females are now in the workforce? If you expand your childcare services, how many % of female workers could you release to the labor market? Can you answer my question? Secretary. Madam Deputy, it's true. In the light of the aging population and business demands for manpower, one of the ways is to consider ways to unleash a potential labor force into the market, and that includes women, other people. Of course, we want to allow women to join the workforce. We need to do more in terms of childcare and family support. And we are aware of that, and the government keeps enhancing such capacity. So we would like more women to join the workforce if they wish to do so. And then that could actually address the manpower demands of the business sector. Mr. Chow Siu-chung, well, Mr. Peter Shiu, you've already asked your supplementary question. Please raise your question at another forum. Sorry to speakers not coming through. Mr. Chow Siu-chung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, in Hong Kong, there is indeed a certain degree of job mismatching. That means there are jobs without people to fill the jobs, so that at the same time there are people without jobs. So on the importation of labor, in sectors where there is a genuine shortage of labor, the labor sector has never been against that. what we need to make sure is that these imported workers would not compete for jobs with local workers. Then it's fine with the labor sector. Now, a number of talent admission scheme under the Immigration Department will be put under the Labor and Welfare Bureau. And then from these schemes, you can see that in past few years, at the peak, we're talking about several tens of thousands of talents being admitted to Hong Kong through these schemes. Now, after these schemes are put under the portfolio of the Labor and Welfare Bureau, I hope the Bureau will step up its control. So for these tens of thousands of quota places, they will be for jobs that where there are no local talents. So my question for the Bureau is this. Now, after these schemes come under the Labor and Welfare Bureau, would they be subject to supervision by the Labor Advisory Board like the Supplementary Labor Scheme? Or say if there are any major plans to import talents, would you consider consulting the Labor and Welfare Advisory Board? You could only ask one question at a time, Mr. Chow. Thank you, Madam Deputy. For the Supplementary Labor Scheme and professional admission schemes now under the Immigration Department, the design and the mechanism, nature of these schemes are different. For the Supplementary Labor Scheme, they are for technicians or the level below. So we will consult the Labor Advisory Board, and then the final decision is made by the Commissioner for Labor. Is a well-established system. As for similarly for admission schemes for professionals, there is a different mechanism. Again, this system has been working well too. So the government is of the view that we should allow these two sets of schemes to operate according to the reference systems. But of course, we'll see if there's room for enhancing the scheme so they could better meet the needs of the reference sectors, while at the same time we could assure priority is given to local workers. Reverend Peter Kun. Thank you, Madam Deputy. On the importation of labor in other countries and regions, usually the initiatives led by the government, so it's a matter for the government to decide. From the written reply, I can't see what the government position is like on this matter, because in certain job types there is definitely a shortage of manpower. So what is the position of government? Are you keen to import labor, or you have no strong views, or what? So could you tell us your position? Secretary. On labor policy, force policy or manpower policy, our policy is that we will first give priority to local workers. But of course, there are some sectors or trades where there is insufficient local manpower to meet their needs. So our policy position is this. Now, in sectors where there is obvious shortage of manpower, and shortage is serious, and then the sectors are not able to hire enough local workers, then we could consider importing workers to offer relief to these sectors. I could give you an example, the Supplementary Labor Scheme. Each year there are about 3,000 approved applications. More than half of the applicants are workers, carers at residential care homes. Of course, if there are other sectors that see serious manpower shortage, we could talk to the relevant stakeholders and see how we could import labor in an appropriate and regulated manner. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. In the main reply, the administration said that it's been sparing no effort in training local talents. Now, in formal education, training is for professionals, but then in the market, here we're talking about mainly non-professionals. Many, with the epidemic, many schools have suspended classes, so or they're just half-day classes, so many women have to stay home to take care of children. They can't join the workforce. Now, the Secretary said that they have specific task forces to deal with such issues. Would you consider forming an interdepartmental working group to formulate policy on labor or manpower resources so that you could address problems when they first arise, as mentioned by the Chief Executive? Secretary, after the reorganization of the government structure, manpower policy now comes under the Labor and Welfare Bureau. I'm sure the member is well aware of this. There is a high-level committee on manpower issues under the leadership of the Chief Secretary for Administration. So through that manpower committee, we will look at the overall situation in relation to talent training. For example, as Mr. Tennis Leung suggested, we could use training or retraining to help people to join the workforce. Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, it's true that in many sectors they are short of staff. And I'm glad to hear that you'll be reviewing the policy and the procedures for importing labor. I hope there will be enhancement. Now, in the main reply, we told about the various policies such as retraining or the continuing education fund and so on. We want to unleash the potential manpower in the population. That you've been, implementing these measures for some time. How effective are they? What is your estimate of the potential manpower resources available in the market? Secretary, on the labor participation rate is remained stable in Hong Kong over the past. There are 3 major groups which are potential manpower resources. Older persons, women, and so on. But of course, if we want them to join the workforce, we need to do more in terms of support facilities. For example, for the older persons, there is need for subsidy. So employers who are prepared to hire these people, they will get a subsidy. And so that is a form of incentive. As for women, in terms of childcare and family care, we need to help them so they could join the workforce without having to worry about their family members. Thank you. Mr. Peter Shiu. My question's not been answered. Mr. Tony Chair. Yes. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Please repeat which part of your question that's not been answered. My question was about the potential labor force. I want to ask him about his estimate of the percentage in terms of the labor force. Secretary, it's hard to give a concrete figure at this point in time about a potential labor force, but we all know there is this potential as long as we provide sufficient incentives and support facilities. But still, we will see how we could measure or get a better idea of how much potential labor force there is. And then we'll see what sort of incentives we could offer so these people would be prepared to join the labor market. Mr. Peter Shiu, before Dr. Law Chi-kwong left his post, he said that at the end of the year, he expects that by the end of the year, the employment rate will be about 4%. After that, it will be about 3%. If it's 3%, that means it's full employment. In the past decade, I'm sure many have heard about this term, full employment. But then for businesses, they really have a hard time hiring people. One reason is, of course, because wages keep going up. And if wages increase, of course, the cost will be transferred to consumers. So in the past, maybe it just cost $20 or $30 for a plate of pork chop rice, but now it's $50, $60. So if you keep trying to find ways to prevent the prevention of labor, importation of labor, then the cost will just be transferred to consumers. Now, importing labor and importing manpower are two separate things. Now, you say you want to unleash more people to join the labor market, say the older people or the women. And then Mr. Frankie Yik, he represents the transport sector. Many of the drivers, minibus drivers, have an average age of over 70. So even so, you won't consider importing labor to help our economic development. Really, I'm worried, Secretary. How can we, promote better economic development? Reverend Peter Kuhn asked about the question too. You said a lot, but what exactly do you plan to do about the importation of labor? What is your position? Now, for our policy position on importation of labor, I've made it clear what our policy is in the main reply. There are a number of principles. First of all, we need to safeguard the employment priority for local workers. Of course, the local labor force is the key driver of economic development. Now, in certain sectors, there may be a serious shortage of manpower. So as hard as we try, we're still not able to meet the development demands of the sector. Then, under those cases, we have to import labor in an appropriate and regulated manner. And then, so we could have regard to the labor market and changes in our economic development and make suitable adjustment. But really, it depends on individual sectors. What we must insist on is that if we could hire local workers or we could apply certain technology to boost our productivity, that would be the best way forward. But if it cannot be done in such a manner, then we have to consider importing labor to meet the needs for manpower for the relevant sectors. Mr. Lam Chen-sing. Thank you, Madam Deputy. For people coming to work in Hong Kong, they don't just come through the supplementary labor scheme. We have the general employment policy and we have admission of talent scheme. So there are tens of thousands of people coming to work in Hong Kong each year. The Secretary said that for these different schemes, they have different objectives and purposes. But then there have been cases in the past. Some of the applications were rejected under the supplementary labor scheme, but then they were approved under the immigration department schemes. In future, the Labor and Welfare Bureau will manage all the schemes. So would you review the admission criteria for the different schemes to make sure that priority will be given to local workers? Secretary. The supplementary labor scheme is for the technicians or the levels below. As for the immigration department, it manages schemes for professionals. Those are very different job types, and there are clear distinctions among these schemes. For each scheme, there are specific purposes, requirements, and criteria. So the most important thing is that we go by the assigned criteria of the scheme in processing applications. So for these two schemes, they deal with totally different job types. For the supplementary labor scheme, we are talking about technicians or below. And for the other scheme, we're talking about talents, professionals. Thank you. So members, you could follow up on the manpower shortage at other forum. Question 4.
Ms. Elizabeth QUAT, thank you. The growth enterprise market known as GEM was launched in 1999 with the aim of enabling small and medium enterprises and innovative enterprises which do not meet the main board's listing requirements to be listed for raising funds. Some members of the financial sector have relayed that following the Wayne internet bubble and the cancellation of the streamlined application procedure for transfer from GEM to the main board made by the authorities in 2018, the number of new listings and trading volume of GEM have been dwindling incessantly. In this connection, will the government inform this council? First, given that the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited commenced a review last year on the positioning and functions of GEM, whether preliminary outcome of the review is available and of the expected date for consulting the market. Second, whether the government will take the lead in making use of the Future Fund or the Hong Kong Growth Portfolio to suitably invest in GEM, or using them as seed money to raise funds by pairing up with the funds from technology venture capital companies for investing in GEM, thereby increasing the capital inflow of GEM, if so, of the details, if not the reasons for that. And third, whether it will, by drawing reference from the practice of the Shenzhen Stock Exchange Chinext in expressly supporting the development of innovative and growth enterprises, reform GEM to attract innovative enterprises of different trades which meet the environmental, social, and governance criteria to list on GEM, or reform GEM by turning it into an innovation and technology board, if so, the details and not the reasons for that. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, I'd like to thank Ms. Elizabeth QUAT for her question. My consolidated reply is as follows. Hong Kong is a major global listing platform for companies from different jurisdictions. The government, the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited, and the Securities and Futures Commission have all along been striving to strengthen the breadth and depth of the Hong Kong fundraising platform. We have continuously refined our listing regime, having regard to the latest developments, with a view to meeting the fundraising needs of issuers while safeguarding the interests of the investing public. In this regard, since its establishment in 1999, the listing rules of GEM have been revised a number of times in view of changing market conditions. In 2017, in response to market views that the requirements of GEM back then have been abused by market participants and problems such as high shareholding concentration, illiquidity, and high share price volatility were common, HKEX repositioned GEM in 2018 as a standalone board after consulting the market. The reform aimed to allow applicants who intend to list in Hong Kong but could not meet the main board listing requirements to choose GEM as a more targeted fundraising platform. In order to improve market quality, HKEX also cancelled the streamlined process for transfer to the main board under GEM, raised the minimum market capitalization requirement for GEM applicants at the time of listing, and implemented the sponsor regime. Since the reform in 2008, Hong Kong EX has been cognizant of market conditions as well as the issues conveyed by electrical members and market participants, such as the drop in number of new listings and turnover of GEM, the lack of interest by issuers and investors, etc. There were also views that further studies should be conducted on the positioning and functions of GEM as a specific board for listing of small and medium-sized enterprises and innovative companies. To this end, HKEX commenced a review on the functions and positioning of GEM last year and established a dedicated panel under the listing committee to handle the work concerned. The review will be conducted with a view to further strengthening the competitiveness of Hong Kong as a global premier listing hub and enhancing the overall quality of the Hong Kong capital market. Alongside facilitating different types of enterprises to list in Hong Kong, HKEX will take into consideration market attractiveness and liquidity and protect the interests of the investing public. The work concerned will involve many aspects, such as understanding the concerns of issuers and investors, exploring ways to enhance the liquidity of existing stocks, identifying the source of potential issuers which are suitable to raise funds through stock market but could not meet the listing requirements of the main board or the existing GEM, assessing the attractiveness and market liquidity of potential issuers, in other words, whether they could attract investors to hold and trade relevant securities continuously, considering relevant risk management measures, etc. Hong Kong EX will also proactively make reference to the experiences of similar markets in other places, including the development of fundraising platforms for SMEs and innovative enterprises in the mainland in recent years, that is, the Science and Technology Innovation Board of the Shanghai Stock Exchange, Chinext of the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, and the Beijing Stock Exchange. The views conveyed by LegCo members to us on different occasions, such as reintroducing the streamlined transfer mechanism, attracting the listing of innovative companies, establishing mutual access with mainland markets, introducing additional avenues for secondary listing, enhancing the environmental, social, and governance, ESG, disclosure standards of listed companies, etc., will be carefully considered as a whole. Since the review involves various complicated issues, Hong Kong EX has yet to devise a concrete timetable on the review. Hong Kong EX will propose specific measures and further consult the market publicly upon understanding the market demands thoroughly and considering relevant risks. As regards the Hong Kong growth portfolio under the Future Fund mentioned in the question, its vision is to make strategic investments in projects with a Hong Kong nexus, with a view to raising Hong Kong's productivity and competitiveness in the long run while seeking reasonable risk-adjusted returns. To avoid potential, actual, or perceived conflict of interest, the government will not be involved directly in the individual investment decisions or specific investment projects. It is the general partners appointed by the investment committee who are private equity firms with professional capabilities to make investments. At the same time, to nurture enterprises that are relatively more mature and have good potential for contribution to our economy, the Financial Secretary announced in the 2022-23 budget speech to further increase the funding allocated to Hong Kong growth portfolio under the Future Fund by $10 billion, of which $5 billion will be used to set up the Strategic Tech Fund. The Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation and Cyberport will be invited to identify technology enterprises which are of strategic value to Hong Kong, as well as investment opportunities conducive to enriching the innovation and technology ecosystem. Relevant preparatory work is underway. In addition, to facilitate the fundraising of technology companies, the Financial Secretary announced in the 2022-23 budget that, considering that some large-scale advanced technology enterprises require substantial capital for their research and development work, but fail to meet the profit and trading record requirements, SFC and Hong Kong EX will review the main board listing rules and, having due regard to the risks involved, examine the revision of the listing requirements to meet the fundraising needs of such enterprises. Hong Kong EX is approaching different stakeholders for views, with a view to putting forward concrete recommendations as soon as practicable and consulting the market publicly. Thank you, President. Ms. Elizabeth QUAT. President, SMEs account for around 90% of all enterprises in Hong Kong. Therefore, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange must further support SMEs to ensure their functions. However, the GEM application procedure requests cash liquidity of 30 million Hong Kong dollars as a requirement. And so it's actually controversial to their original functions, and many SMEs could not meet this requirement. So recently, you have seen almost no companies applying to be registered on the GEM. So how are you going to support the SMEs by these measures? Secretary, thank you. This is a very important issue that you raised. Although we are focusing on the reforming of the GEM listing today, this is something for consideration on how to mobilize funds. And maybe I can further elaborate when I address other members' questions. GEM's reform not only affects liquidity and fund mobilization. We are hoping to support SMEs, and we are working on areas to help them. Through technology, we actually have a digital connect to help SMEs to use a digital platform so as to reduce the usage of hard assets, and so to help them mobilize more funds. And in our procurement, I have given a very long response previously that we hope that we don't really need a track record as purchase, so that other SMEs can also participate in our tender. This is part of the growth for SMEs. But today we're focusing on the GEM reform. We've always been conducting consultation work on this end. Secretary. Oh, wait. Which question did he not answer you, Ms. Kwok? Oh, the secretary said that SME doesn't have this one listing channel. But Ms. Kwok, you can, this is not a debate. Well, but actually, fund mobilization is very important. The secretary did not answer my question. You just need to point out which part he did not answer. So how are you going to help SME to become listed? Secretary. At this current moment, if you look at the positioning of GEM, it is very clear that we're providing service for SMEs. Although Ms. Kwok mentioned the 30 million requirement, there's actually no profit and income requirement. When we positioned GEM, we wanted it to become an individual platform for SMEs. We have always been focusing on the issues. So from the enterprise perspective, of course, they would want a direct fund mobilization, but then there are also different channels. Secondly, some enterprises choose to become listed on the main board. They might not want to go for a GEM listing. So it really depends on the different needs of the enterprises. It doesn't mean that we are just going to leave it as it is. Therefore, there is already a task force under the listing committee, a dedicated panel to handle the work concerned. In my response, I did say that there is a certain complexity because there are two ways to improve the GEM. We would need from both the supply and demand side. We need investors' involvement and also the involvement of the monitoring agencies, and we also need intermediaries. Therefore, we need more time to work on that. However, we are still going to continue to listen to members' views. Mr. Robert Lee, thank you. Based on the question raised, the HKMA in March published a report in which some proposals were made on short, mid, and long-term views, including that based on the listing rules of 18A to provide requirements for certain technological companies to also be extended to other enterprises, and then in accordance with 8 bracket A on some of the standards, and third, to set up a new framework for SMEs to better balance the protection for investors. I would like to ask the administration whether these proposals could be followed up with concrete plans and timetable. Secretary. Through the dedicated panel under the listing committee and through our meeting with members, we have heard these views. I have briefly explained that this review, we hope to consider all sides, including the listing requirements, and whether we should once again reactivate the streamlined application procedure or speed up listing procedures, and maybe even to work with mainland counterparts. So these are all part of our recent discussions. The HKMA report, to a certain degree, reflects the directions and concrete suggestions given. Once we set a timetable, we are going to update this to members. Dr. Kennedy Wong. President, this question raised by Ms. QUAT is very important. For Hong Kong to become a technological hub, it is very important to look for funding. I see from the administration's response that actually they're exploring the star market of the Shanghai Stock Exchange, China Next of the Shenzhen Stock Exchange. Therefore, we see that the PE ratio is really quite high on the mainland. Since the administration has been discussing with the mainland on southbound connect, would you also continue to expand the scope so that mainland investors can also invest in smaller enterprises and not just on large-scale enterprises? The sponsor for main board listing in Hong Kong can also act as a market maker. GEM is mainly for newer companies, and there may not be too high of a market issuance and liquidity may not be as strong. But can the administration consider in future to allow market maker to also provide service to the GEM board as well? Secretary, let me try to address these questions. First of all, from a more general point of view, how can we better allow southbound investment? We are trying to optimize our stock connect to try to control our risk and at the same time push for such exchanges. SMEs, including some of the non-profit sci-tech companies on our main board. So these are all included in the Stock Connect. Can this also include GEM as well? Well, we must set a strong foundation before the southbound investment. We must ensure that we have a strong foundation to attract such investments. We have now northbound, we already have the innovation board, and southbound, we can work on optimizing Stock Connect so that markets on both sides can further develop. However, on the premise, we must first prepare well. Therefore, we must continue with our consultation and we will consider the market maker proposal. Dr. Tan Yue-hung. Thank you, President. Well, it's actually a dilemma or a conflict for Hong Kong market. On one side, some large enterprises want to become listed, yet they're not able to meet the requirements of the main board. Yet, on the other hand, there are some issues with GEM. And this has been a problem for many years. Of course, we cannot say that we should go back to the 2017 requirements and just make change immediately. So I would like to ask the Secretary whether you would consider to try to also introduce the main board listing requirement 18A into GEM. For example, on the team support on such of the listing requirements, can you consider actually using some of the listing requirements and to have them used in GEM? I'm sorry, you can only raise one question, but can you actually to try to provide some tax incentives for those who want to become listed in Hong Kong? and perhaps provide such a tax waiver, or perhaps to provide them with a cash rebate or cash incentive. Secretary. Thank you for your questions. Let me try to address this from two perspectives. First of all, on listing requirements, Dr. Tan is correct. The review is not only to just review the listing requirements. We want to improve the market. We also need to ensure trading in its growth. Therefore, we will need to look at the threshold and also to consider how the enterprises are after going listed. Secondly, on a profit requirement, at this moment, we do not have such a requirement at GEM. We only have a cash flow requirement. So, to a certain extent, for those without profit or no income, such as many of the new tech companies, we do have arrangements for those companies. But there are some differences here, because for biomedical companies, even though they are operating without profit and without income, investors can assess the value of the company, because there are many objectives, such as clinical trial results. And so these indicators are actually separate from the company's profit. But investors sort of know of the performance through such indicators. Well, GEM is not limited to a certain enterprise. It's actually an open market. So how are we going to go forward? We'll listen to all views.
Question number 5, the Honorable LAI Tung-kwok. Madam Deputy, in 2005, the Hong Kong Housing Authority divested 180 non-residential properties to the Link Real Estate Investment Trust, the Link. The Link was subsequently renamed as Link Real Estate Investment Trust, Link REIT. Many members of the public have relayed that shop tenants have been constantly subject to rental increases imposed by Link REIT despite its poor management, and that a number of commercial facilities in public rental housing estates and subsidized housing estates have been divested by Link REIT since 2014. And the management conditions of these divested facilities have further worsened. For example, shops in shopping centers have been left vacant, and play equipment has not been maintained or has been abandoned for years. Some shopping centers have even been almost entirely converted into schools. Such changes have aroused grave dissatisfaction among local residents. In this connection, will the government inform this council, given that the judgment handed down by the Court of Final Appeal in 2005 on a judicial review case regarding the aforesaid sale of properties by HA pointed out that even though the housing ordinance did not expressly or impliedly require HA to retain and control the amenities in takeout estates, HA still had a responsibility to secure the provision of amenities ancillary to housing as HA thought fit for residents. Whether it has compiled statistics on the number of cases since 2014 involving amenities ancillary to PRH estates and subsidized housing estates which are owned by a third party over whom HA has no control and are lacking timely maintenance or are being abandoned with the breakdown by district council districts, and of the information on the actions taken by the authorities and the latest progress of each case. 2. Whether it knows the latest ownership status of the 180 non-residential properties sold to Link REIT. If so, set out in a table the respective properties currently still owned by Link REIT and those resold, as well as the information about the owners of the resold properties. If not, how the authorities can, in the absence of such key information, fulfill the requirement under the housing ordinance regarding the responsibility to secure the provision of amenities to housing for residents. And 3, whether it has summed up the effectiveness and deficiencies of the facilitation efforts made by the fifth term Azero government in resolving the problems relating to commercial facilities in PRH estates and subsidized housing estates. Secretary for Housing. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Our consolidated reply to the question raised by the Honourable LAI Tung-kwok is as follows. The Hong Kong Housing Authority, HA, divested 180 properties in 2005 through the Link Real Estate Investment Trust, now known as Link REIT, in order to focus on its core function of providing subsidized public housing and improve its financial position. It was considered that the efficiency of the commercial facilities would also be enhanced under the operation of a private entity in accordance with commercial principles. Under Section 4(1) of the Housing Ordinance, HA is required to secure the provision of housing and such amenities ancillary thereto as the authority thinks fit for the persons involved. When handing down its judgment in 2005 on a judicial review case on HA's divested properties, the Court of Final Appeal, CFA, affirmed that the divestment plan by HA was consistent with the objectives as laid down in Section 4(1). According to CFA, it was not stipulated in the Housing Ordinance that tenants of PRH had any statutory right to the continued retention and control by HA of the facilities while the tenants were still using the facilities. HA had already secured the provision of such facilities as long as the facilities were provided for use by the tenants, even if they were provided by a third party over whom HA had no control. In reaching its conclusions, CFA noted that a market-oriented commercial approach would be adopted in operating the divested properties, whereas HA's approach at that time might not be in line with private sector practice. CFA also noted that the operation mode of the relevant facilities might change. As at June 2022, among the 180 properties divested by HA, Link REIT remains the owner of 123 properties. The names of these properties are provided at Annex 1 for your reference. For the other 56 properties that have been sold to other owners, the names of these properties and their respective owners are provided at Annex 2. As with other private property owners, divested property owners are governed by laws, land lease conditions, and deeds of mutual covenant, DMCs. The assignment deeds between HA and divested property owners also contain, on a case-by-case basis, certain restrictive covenants. Provided that the owners concerned comply with the legal requirements, land lease conditions, and the covenants with HA, the government and HA cannot and will not interfere with their day-to-day operations and commercial decisions, including disposal of properties, letting arrangements. However, if it is confirmed that the owner concerned is in breach of any laws, land lease conditions, or covenants with HA, the relevant government departments and HA will certainly pursue the matter seriously and take appropriate actions. On the management and maintenance matters of common areas and recreation facilities in housing estates, there are provisions under the DMCs, which stipulate that the owners shall discharge their responsibilities. For instance, in accordance with some DMCs, owners are obliged to make available recreation facilities situated in the commercial facilities for use by residents, as well as manage and maintain such facilities in a proper manner. As the DMC manager of some housing estates, HA may, in accordance with the DMC provisions, require the owners to comply with the relevant provisions. Now, for TPS estates, from 1st of January 2017 to 1st of May 2022, there were 32 cases involving the maintenance of recreational facilities at the divested properties in PRH estates. All the repairs of the recreational facilities have been completed and reopened for residents' use. Details of these works are set out in Annex 3. For home ownership scheme and tenants purchase scheme, incorporated owners and its property management company can refer cases to relevant divested property owners through the DMC manager for follow-up action. HA has no certain record on the works concerned. The government encourages various stakeholders to offer their views to divested property owners, enabling them to have a better grasp of the concerns of the residents and the public when formulating their business strategies. In view of the fact that these properties are located in PRH estates and that their residents are major service targets, the government encourages divested property owners to shoulder their corporate social responsibilities by strengthening communication with various stakeholders in their day-to-day operation. The government has been meeting the management of individual divested property owners regularly to understand their development direction and to relate to them the concerns of various sectors. As one of the stakeholders, HA also maintains communication with divested property owners and refer cases to IOs, their property managed companies, or relevant government departments for follow-up actions. For example, in 2018, HA referred to the concerns of tenants on the noise nuisance arising from the loading and unloading of goods in Tai Warehouse Shopping Center to the property management company, and the incident has been properly handled. In 2018, HJ also sent a letter to the divested property owner in relation to the closure of part of the car park at Yatong Estate and referred the case to the Lands Department for follow-up. After the follow-up, the relevant part was reopened later. In fact, it is noted that divested property owners have been striving to fulfill their corporate social responsibilities through various means in recent years. An example is that a divested property owner has cooperated with non-government organizations to carry out food recycling in its fresh markets and shopping centers and assisted the production of meals and food packs for families in need. Also, in response to the COVID-19 2019 epidemic, measures such as fee waivers or rent concessions are provided to tenants. I hope that divested property owners will continue to respond to the concerns of PRH residents for improving the quality of life while enhancing the operational efficiency. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Mr. LAI Tung-kwok. I note the Secretary's reply is skirting around the problem here in her reply. She said that HA maintains communication with divested property owners and refer cases to them in a timely manner. This is the way she used to describe her follow-up action. She only cited individual examples, but she hasn't directly answered how they will handle the problem of long-time vacancies in shopping centers, and some of them have even been turned to schools. These affect the lives of people adversely. Now, Secretary, in the past few years, have you taken the initiative to look into whether the owners have abided by the land lease conditions and the DMC provisions? And you will not just take the approach whereby you would only act on complaints or when you identified irregularities. If the Secretary has not done so, why? And if yes, can you provide the details to the Council? Secretary. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Like I said, well, the operation of every shopping mall is governed by land lease conditions and DMCs and so on. So these have to be enforced. But daily communication also matters a lot. And I encourage the PRH residents to reflect their views to the Housing Department through various means. If they identify irregularities, say, for example, facilities supposedly to be opened have not been opened, and if commercial organizations have organized activities or events which cause nuisance to the residents, I encourage residents to communicate to the Housing Department. And I think that would more effectively tackle any problem. Now, we've heard some examples whereby some shopping centers have been turned into an educational center. Has that breached the land lease condition? But then the education institution is also a commercial or business organization, and the land lease allows for that. So we have been taking a proactive approach, and I think it's more effective when we actually examine the problems one by one. I think that's a more effective approach. Mr. Tan Ka-pu, Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank Mr. LAI Tung-kwok for raising this question. In fact, in the past 2 terms of government, the 3 livelihood issues have been floated, and the link rate has been one of the major obstacles, and it seems that nothing has been done to tackle it. Now we have this housing bureau, an independent bureau to deal with housing issues. So we must deal with this hot button issue of the link rate. Now, Mr. LAI Tung-kwok referred to the divestment of properties by the link rate, and actually we have been the PRH residents have been deceived. And in Kwun Tong Po Tui Court, the owners corporations and the owners have been complaining to me. I'm handling that. The recreational facilities were used, are owned by the link rate. For a long time, no maintenance work has been carried out, and it refuses to let the residents to use this space. And then the owners have to show that 70% of the maintenance and repair costs. Would you come with me together to Po Pui Court to understand the difficulties the residents face there? Thank you. Secretary, I thank Mr. Tang citing a very specific examples. In fact, I don't have information on hand on the details of this Kwun Tong case, but after the meeting, I would definitely follow up duly with my colleague. And I welcome Mr. Tang to provide more information on the situation to us. And in fact, we attach a lot of importance to such individual cases. If we find anything not right, we will follow up immediately. And whether it's, say, the link REIT or divested property owners, they would always try to improve the design and the facilities. It's a win-win situation for all. For example, the football pitches of Ka Yim Estate, young designers have been pulled in to come up with very colorful design and better facilities. And these have been reported extensively in magazines and other channels, and that brings benefits to the shopping mall as well. So we welcome that kind of win-win solutions. And if we can make better use of recreation facilities, everyone stands to benefit. I'm more than happy to follow up duly with Mr. Tang Ka-piu after the meeting. Ms. Doreen Kwong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Secretary, Mr. LAI Tung-kwok raised an issue which is very pressing. Now, you say you will communicate. I think you actually are tackling the problem in an oversimplified way. Your answer mentions that as long as the link REIT and the property owners meet with the relevant laws, the HA cannot and will not interfere with the commercial operation. So you are not able to control or govern them, even if you want to do so. Now, when you first divested the properties, the link rate, I don't think you have thoroughly considered this, that you have not come up with a legal framework to safeguard the rights of the PRH residents to enjoy the use of the relevant recreational facilities. Secretary, well, for the assignment deeds back then, I think these were signed already. And under these assignment deeds, there are restrictive covenants governing shopping centers, retail facilities, and car parking spaces. So these covenants will be passed on even if the properties are further divested. But I also attach importance to communication on top of the legal provisions. And we communicate. We might not rely on the legal provisions in what we do. And I think in the new term government, I think we should communicate more. It will be a very effective tool. We will continue to liaise with the relevant organizations, and we will tell them that there will be better solutions maybe sometimes to achieve a win-win situation. These solutions may benefit both themselves and the residents in the housing estates. I will not repeat the individual examples, and if needed, you can approach myself and HD colleagues who will definitely proactively follow up. Dr. Chong Man Kong. The link read and divested property owners are running shopping centers where a lot of vacant shops are seen, and they are charging very expensive rentals, and some of the shops have been left vacant for a long time. So will the administration come up with new regulations to ensure that these owners will provide facilities for PRH residents? And would you also be charging a vacancy tax on shops, space which have been vacant for a long time? Secretary. My view on shop vacancy is this. For some divested property owners, they have used the shopping centers for services related to NGOs, and they provide services to the members of the public. These are good measures, and so space can be better utilized in that way. And concessionary rentals are also offered. So we can further explore with the link read and divested property owners on how they can better discharge their social responsibility. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, it is a major mistake for the government to divest properties to the link read. The FTU way back objected to this. Now, Mr. LAI Tung-kwok asked about the fact that the recreational facilities are left abandoned or lack maintenance related to shopping centers where the HA has no control over. The government has not provided the relevant information requested. Now, 180 properties have been divested. For example, in Hon Yam Estate, above the shopping center, there is a tennis court. Now, after that divestment, the tennis court has not been open for the use by the residents. Now, there is a lift going up to the rooftop, and the property management even forbids residents to use that lift to go to the rooftop. So, Secretary, do you have information on recreational facilities which have been abandoned? And do you have information concerned so that we can better grasp the situation? Secretary. You refer to Hon Yam Estate and the lift therein. I really don't have the information on the situation in individual housing estate. Like the Kwun Tong case mentioned by the other member, I welcome you furnishing me with further information after the meeting. I will immediately follow up with our HD colleagues to make sure that the facilities can be put up for use by residents again. Mr. Scott Leung. I have been a district councillor for many years. And I think what happens is related to the role of the property management company. The HA is the DMC manager, but then it's not playing its role properly. Now, there has been damage to public facilities, and the divested property owner is stalling its feet in repairing the relevant facilities. So will the government take specific action to put pressure on these owners and say, ask them to give a timeline to communicate with the residents so that the inconvenience caused to the residents can be minimized? Thank you. Secretary. As to how to apportion the maintenance costs, well, there is clear stipulation in the relevant covenant. If they don't comply with the covenant, we will follow up seriously. We may issue a warning letter, and if there is a stalling or procrastination, we can take legal action. Again, if you have information on specific cases, I welcome you provide me with the information.
Last question seeking an oral reply. Mrs. Regina IP is not present, so in accordance with the rules of procedure, I now invite Mr. Peter SHIU to ask the question on her behalf. Mr. SHIU. Currently, the Future Fund FF is placed with the Exchange Fund EF. In accordance with the Exchange Fund Ordinance, the statutory purposes for which EF is established are to use the fund for such purposes as the Financial Secretary thinks fit, affecting either directly or indirectly the exchange value of the currency of Hong Kong, to maintain Hong Kong as an international financial center, and to maintain the stability and the integrity of the monetary and financial systems of Hong Kong. Unless the Financial Secretary exercises his discretion pursuant to the resolution for the establishment of the Land Fund passed by the Provisional Legislative Council under Section 29 of the Public Finance Ordinance on the 23rd of July 1997, the investment of FF is governed by the Public Finance Ordinance, and it is inappropriate to use EF for high-risk investments. Will the government inform this council whether it will, by drawing reference from the experience of the Singapore government in using government assets to set up Temasek, consider packaging the free road harbour crossings in Hong Kong after the revocation of the franchise of the Western Harbour Crossing in August next year to set up a wealth fund which is to be used under a public-private partnership approach to invest in sound investment projects with long-term value-added potential in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, and the Northern Metropolis? If so, of the specific proposals. If not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, Secretary, have you put on your microphone? Staff, please turn on the microphone. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. President, I'm very much grateful to the member for proposing to set up a wealth fund with the ultimate aim of promoting investments in sound investment projects with long-term value-added potential in Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, GBA, and the Northern Metropolis. The proposal is actually in line with the government strategy of promoting Hong Kong's long-term development by making good use of the Future Fund FF and setting up the Hong Kong Growth Portfolio, HKGP. In response to the question put forward, I have consulted the Transport and Logistics Bureau on tunnel-related issues. Provide a consolidated reply as follows. On the 1st of January 2016, the FF was established by the government with an initial endowment of $219.7 billion, being the balance of the Land Fund at the time held as a notional savings account. On the 1st of July 2016, the government injected one-third of the 2015 to 16 fiscal surplus, that is $4.8 billion, into the FF as its first periodic top-up. The FF is meant to secure high returns for the fiscal reserves through long-term investments. A large portion of the FF is placed with the Exchange Fund and linked to the returns of its investment portfolio and long-term growth portfolio. Up to 2021, the FF has achieved an average composite rate of investment return of about 9.8%. To make better use of the FF, the Financial Secretary FS announced in the 2020-21 budget that 10% of the FF, that is about $22 billion, will be deployed to set up the HKGP for making strategic investments in projects with a Hong Kong nexus, with a view to reinforcing Hong Kong's status as the financial, trading and innovation and technology center, as well as raising Hong Kong's productivity and competitiveness in the long run while seeking reasonable risk-adjusted returns. Besides to support the development of the GBA and facilitate the expansion of Hong Kong's industries in the GBA so as to enable further integration in our country's overall development, the FS announced in the 2022-23 budget that the government would increase the funding allocated to the Hong Kong GP by $10 billion, of which $5 billion will be used to set up a GBA investment fund. The fund will focus on projects in the GBA that can benefit Hong Kong, including those undertaken by Hong Kong-based companies or companies with investment in the GBA. As regards the Northern Metropolis, the FS also announced in the 2022-23 budget that the government would set aside $100 billion from the cumulative return of the FF to set up a dedicated fund in order to ensure that there would be sufficient funding for meeting the development needs under the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy and to expedite the implementation of the projects in the area. The Northern Metropolis covers a number of projects, some of which are already underway. The government will implement these projects in phases according to schedule, with due consideration given to financial viability and sustainability. With the development of the Northern Metropolis, the private development projects in the area may also generate income for the government. Under the existing government arrangement, toll revenue is credited to the General Revenue Account, GRA, and is balanced together with the balances of other funds established under the Public Finance Ordinance, including Land Fund and Capital Works Reserve Fund, will automatically become part of the fiscal reserves. As far as promoting investments in the GBA is concerned, we can follow the existing arrangement of making injections into the FF from the GRA if the government finds it necessary to increase the size of the FF. As for developing the Northern Metropolis, the government will consider and explore various financing options, including the feasibility of enabling private sector organizations' participation in the financing and provision of public services under public-private partnership. In other words, apart from seeking funding approval from the Finance Committee of the Legislative Council, we will work out appropriate financing arrangements for different infrastructure projects in the Northern Metropolis by carefully taking into account various factors, including their characteristics, economic values, commercial viability, the need for the government to take part in their operations and construction costs. It is therefore possible that a mixture of different options may be adopted in terms of the financial arrangements for the projects in the Northern Metropolis. However, we share members' goal of making good use of the government's assets and investment in sound investment projects with long-term value-added potential so as to build a better Hong Kong. Thank you, President. Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary. In 2016, the government set up the Future Fund, drawing funds from the Exchange Fund. It was because it wanted the investment approach to be different than that of the Exchange Fund. It wanted to make a long-term and strategic investment and improve our fiscal structure. But then since the establishment of the Future Fund, it still comes under the Exchange Fund, and investment is the responsibility of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. So it's still subject to the existing regulatory approach. Future Fund accounts for less than 5% of the Exchange Fund. It won't affect monetary stability. And with increasing Sino-American tensions, it's time for the Exchange Fund to consider a more diversified investment approach. So would the government consider taking the FF out of the Exchange Fund altogether so that the Future Fund won't be subject to the same restrictions for investment under the Exchange Fund? This will help to build a better future for Hong Kong. Secretary, if I may focus on the Hong Kong growth portfolio operation under the Future Fund, I think that's is actually the concern of the member. That is how we could more effectively and better use our financial resources so that apart from gaining returns, we could also strategically consolidate Hong Kong's position as a financial center, innovation and technology centers, and so on. Well, actually, the current operation of the Hong Kong growth portfolio is such that at the top level, we have a governance committee. It's chaired by the financial secretary. So that is actually the framework. And then under the governance committee, there is an investment committee chaired by myself. And then I will identify or select general partners. So far, we have 8 general partners covering many different sectors, technology, healthcare, logistics, supply chain management, trade and industry, consumption, and so on. So we want to identify quality partners to invest in the future of Hong Kong. Now, so it's about investing in the future, which is a subject of interest to Dr. Hong, as she just mentioned. And then in future, we're going to Now, the Financial Secretary has announced that there will be another $55 billion of injection into the growth portfolio. $5 billion for GBA investment and $5 billion for strategic tech fund. So again, we share the same direction as that mentioned by Dr. Hong in terms of our investment approach. Thank you. Mr. LAI Tung-kwok. You did not. Thank you, Madam Deputy. It seems the Secretary did not answer Ms. Regina Ip's question. That is, can you package the 3 tunnels? Then we could gain funds for investment in Northern Metropolis. Well, yes, you told us you don't have any specific plan, but you have various channels. But then Mrs. Regina Ip has proposed this particular channel for you to make the investment. So what is your position? Secretary, well, perhaps I'll answer the question on 2 fronts. First, if we look at the Northern Metropolis or the Land Out Tomorrow vision, we have to look at the overall planning, and then we will arrange financing accordingly. As I mentioned in the main reply, there's a good chance that we'll have some sort of a cocktail therapy, in other words, a composite plan, because we have to look at the commercial viability and the possibility of introducing private participation and so on for a project before we make estimates and plans. So it's about how we can make good use of our assets. So can we actually use a private capital for a project is something we will have to consider. So there are many options, and the option you just mentioned is one that we could consider too. Now, the member, well, actually, I read that article written by the member, published in the newspaper. So I think we have to look at the whole planning process and the financing needs, and then we'll make the suitable arrangement. That's the second point. Third point, now, Mrs. Ip has put forward this proposal. What are the considerations? Well, we have done something similar. It's the securitization of 5 tunnels and 1 bridge. And there are several considerations behind that project. One, of course, is of the macro financial consideration. And then we also have to look at the quality of the assets. So for tunnels, they are not a growth investment in a way. And then investors, of course, will have to do comparison to see if there are other better options. Now, we are having an increase in interest rate, and then people will consider their return, say, if they deposit money in the bank and so on. So in short, in response to the question, this is one of the directions we'll consider to see how we could revitalize our assets in support of our strategic investment strategy. Ms. Carmen Ken. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Mrs. Regina Ip's question points out to one thing. For the $219 billion future fund, it was set up in 2016. It came from the $800 billion plus exchange fund. The land fund. Well, the land fund was set up by a resolution, and then Financial Secretary, in accordance with Section 7 of the resolution, the Financial Secretary could exercise discretion to make investment in a way he so decides. So there is supposed to be flexibility. But now the land fund, which is supposed to have flexibility, became the exchange fund, and now we have the future fund out of the exchange fund. So again, there are restrictions on the investment strategy, such as the investment products and so on. There's less flexibility. So the Secretary still has not answered Dr. Wendy Hong's and Mr. LAI Tung-kwok's question. That is the very core of the main question of Mrs. Regina Ip. So the government has not answered the question. So would you consider taking the future fund out of the exchange fund so there could be more flexible investment? If you don't have such considerations, what are the reasons? Secretary. I think the member has ask the question, and really, if we want to take, we are actually setting up we set up the future fund out of the exchanges because we want to have other more flexible investment. So we're already doing that, and some members is very concerned that if everything is put under the exchange fund, then our investment strategy may be too conservative. And then we could not achieve any strategic benefits other than investment returns. Well, that's exactly why we have the Hong Kong Growth Portfolio. There are 3 levels. First, we have the Governance Committee chaired by the Financial Secretary, and then we have the Investment Committee to select general partners for making investment. We think this is the right direction because that's a way for us to make good use of our financial resources. And then we should consider not just Hong Kong's status as an international financial center, but also an innovation and technology center and so on. So we need to make sure we could add value to these centers. And then when we select general partners, we look at their experience in the relevant sector. For example, biotechnology, consumption, and so on, as I explained. Because we want to use private resources and revitalize our investment portfolio for the long-term benefit of Hong Kong. But would there be other major initiatives? Well, we are more than happy to listen to the views of members on that. Thank you. Mr. Holden Chow. Madam Deputy, in Mrs. Regina IP's question, it's actually talking about changing our approach so we could invest in some suitable projects in the GBA. Now, $5 billion has been used to set up the GBA investment fund. So if we invest in that, now these days when we talk about KPI, we shouldn't just be talking about monetary returns. We have to see whether the investment will help to promote the development of GBA in a way that benefits the people of Hong Kong. So if the money is put in the GBA investment fund, apart from looking at the monetary return, are there any other indicators to measure whether the fund will help Hong Kong people to integrate better into the GBA development? Secretary. Oh, Mr. Ho Chow raises a very important question. So how do we measure the performance of the investment, and how do we monitor the investment to make sure that we could meet the intended objectives? On the first point, when we select general partners, first, we will only select experts in the sector. And also we have to consider the Hong Kong nexus, but then the definition must be wide. And so these companies must have been listed in Hong Kong. Apart from that, can they bring their production lines to Hong Kong? What about their R&D functions? Could they be relocated to Hong Kong? And then we also see whether the development could help to promote the development of the industrial chain as a whole. So these are what we consider in terms of the Hong Kong nexus. Second question, so when we have set the criteria, how do we monitor the criteria are met? With the support of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, we will do annual review. We will see if the investments achieve the intended aim. And of course, the colleagues of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority have regular communication with partners, and so you can rest assured. Ms. Carmen Ken. Thank you, Madam Deputy. The Secretary still has not answered the question. Now, for the Hong Kong Growth Portfolio or the Long-Term Portfolio, however you name it, is still under the exchange fund. Is that correct? Can I ask the Secretary to confirm that's the case? If it's still subject to the exchange fund ordinance, then it's still subject to the statutory purposes of the exchange fund, because the statutory purpose of the exchange fund is just limited to purposes that may affect the exchange rate of Hong Kong. Is about maintaining Hong Kong's position as an international financial center is to maintain our monetary stability. So that's why there are restrictions and the approach is conservative. So even if you call it the Hong Kong growth portfolio or long-term growth portfolio, it's still under the exchange fund, right? Is that the case? Can you confirm that? Secretary, put simply, the growth portfolio has actually been taken out of the exchange fund. It's no longer a part of the exchange fund. So we'll go by the standards set by the governance committee, and then the investment committee will identify general partners. So your concern is not valid. Dr. Wendy Hong, please turn on Dr. Hong's microphone. Dr. Hong, please repeat your question. Thank you, Secretary, for your reply. If may ask further, would you consider taking the future fund out of the exchange fund altogether? Then there will be more flexibility for the future fund. Secretary, in the main reply, I've actually touched upon that. That's the direction in the long run. It's a way for us to revitalize our assets. So we will consider different suggestions and directions, and maybe after the meeting we could follow up on how we could ensure fiscal stability. We could maximize our resources. Thank you. End of question. Government Bill first.